Welcome to Ira's Everything Bagel, where I talk with intriguing people about everything, their passions, pursuits, and points of view. Mental illness is an ongoing topic in today's world, despite the stigma sometimes attached to it. Now add the complexity of a bipolar therapist, and you have the makings of a story that can help people dealing with mental illness. My guest today is Marcia Naomi Berger. She's author of The Bipolar Therapist, A Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the usual places. And for everything about Marcia Naomi Berger, go to marcianaomiberger.com and follow her on LinkedIn and Facebook. And Marcia, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
Sure. When did you realize you first had a problem? Were you already a professional therapist, or was it earlier in time?
Now, I was a professional therapist. I was highly respected, working at an alcoholism treatment center in San Francisco when I had my first manic episode. And I can't say that I recognized it as a mental illness because, like many of us who are first diagnosed or hospitalized, we don't think it's a problem. It was just circumstances, or I was under a lot of stress. I think I'd have to say when I started taking medication during my third hospitalization, within a year and a half, that was when I said, okay, I have to do something.
Why did it take 3 times for you to finally realize that you needed to address the issue?
All right, in the alcoholism world, there's an expression: denial is not just a river in Egypt. So that was it, denial.
I understand. And for our audience, can you explain what bipolar is? I mentioned it in the beginning, but a lot of people may not know what actually bipolar is, as opposed to so many other mental illnesses out there.
The term bipolar refers to extremes in ups and downs of our moods. So somebody who is bipolar, it can manifest itself in different ways. For some people, like me, when I got into trouble, I was having manic episodes. I did not have the kind of severe depression that would result in hospitalization or a ongoing kind of need for medication. But there are people, many people, cycle up and down, and they will have the manic episodes, which is fleeting thoughts, trouble sleeping, sometimes delusions of grandeur, thinking that we have all these special powers. I certainly went through that. So there's different kinds of bipolar, and some people have more depression, and some people have more of the mania, and some have only one.
Was it tougher because you were a mental health professional? Was it tougher to address the issue?
I'm not sure. I probably would have had a hard time either way, whether I was a mental health professional or not. It was very tough having colleagues who were mental health professionals who had a very hard time accepting me with respect after I had the quote unquote breakdowns.
Mm-hmm. It must have been tough writing the book, because you lay it out there, and not only the disrespect or lack of respect or less respect from your colleagues, but also you have to question your ability to work with clients and patients to help them, because you don't know. I would imagine, now this is me projecting, I would imagine if I had bipolar, which I don't, because I'm just consistently depressed, so I'm not bipolar. Anyway, it must be hard though as a therapist, if you recognize there's an issue with you, to not let that interfere helping others.
Actually, I'd say the opposite is what happened. I think that I had a lot of, before and even after, I did not lose my confidence in my ability to help people as a therapist. It's like two different things. There was my condition, and there was my knowledge and skills. And I actually became more compassionate towards some of my clients, especially when, after I worked in the alcoholism treatment center for 5.5 years, and the atmosphere had become pretty toxic for me because of the lack of acceptance from my colleagues, and much worse, really, almost, in some cases, harassment. And ironically, I got recruited to work in a psych ward at San Francisco General Hospital. And because of my experiences as an inpatient, always each time wanting to get out as soon as I could, back to my life, get out of the hospital, I ended up probably, I know I did, I treated more patients than my colleagues on the psych ward, because there would be a routine where they come in, they're usually psychotic or something else, but often they were either bipolar or schizophrenic. And so our routine would be, we would get them on medication, stabilize them, have a discharge plan, and then discharge them. I did everything faster because I knew how much I wanted to be out. And it wasn't something I even thought about. I just did it.
It was a shortcut because you were more efficient given your experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How important is, and I ask this occasionally of a guest, in your case, to me, it's even more of an important question, but how important is it to to have a sense of humor about yourself dealing with what you're dealing with, but also does it help clients or patients if you have a sense of humor and you communicate that to them?
A sense of humor is almost crucial to get through life, I would say. And definitely helps in the work to have a sense of humor with clients. I mean, everybody benefits from having endorphins, those feel good kind of hormones. And when we laugh and when we smile, that helps. And we want that from our clients and our patients, to be able to laugh at themselves and laugh at situations. And that I believe that does bring more mental and emotional clarity.
Mm-hmm. When you, after the third hospitalization, and then you realized the light went on and you realized, I guess I have to get some help here. What is that like? And no personal details per se, but more in the sense of conceptually, when you get that help, and it can be in the form of talking to someone, medication, etc. Does the help last, or do you always have to be on guard to maintain your equilibrium so you don't get into those manic states?
Well, the medication is the big deal, and the medication is monitored. It should be monitored. In my case, I was seeing a psychiatrist who was actually a very good therapist as well. It wasn't just medication. I would be talking about my life and my goals and what was getting in the way. And but the medication would be monitored regularly. So I wasn't going around worrying that I was going to flip out because I was being monitored.
But you wouldn't necessarily, as you talked earlier about alcoholics, you wouldn't necessarily cheat on your medication, would you? Or because I'm sure you encounter that with clients or patients where
Right.
they don't take
Yeah.
the appropriate dosage, or they don't take it at all, and they lie.
Yeah.
They say that they did.
At San Francisco General, we called it the revolving door because the people would, a lot of medications have side effects for different people, experience them differently. And especially if the side effect is, it just makes it hard for them to think clearly or to walk straight. So they get out and they go off their medication, and then they're back again, and it repeats itself. We'd have certain patients that would just, we would know them. They would come in every few months or a couple of times a year.
I could see the revolving door though in San Francisco, where they go out the revolving door and sell their medication on the street and then come back.
Oh, I don't think this was the kind of medication people were selling. It wasn't heroin or
Right.
cocaine.
Understood.
It was
Understood.
yeah, those other medications might make people psychotic. That's what they're selling.
Well, you had obviously support, and I want to get into that in a moment, but did you get some flack from any professional associations while you were dealing with this?
No, I never did. In fact, I have this feeling that at the Alcoholism Treatment Center that they might have treated me like a family secret, because if you know what I mean, just they'll keep it in there,
Yeah, keep it
in
within
their
the
realm. Because my next job, it was in the same basic community mental health or public health system of San Francisco. And I learned much later that nobody there knew. Somebody who wrote an endorsement. My book is called The Bipolar Therapist: Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning. And one of my colleagues who endorsed the book which meant that he read it. And
Mhm.
I had to pump him a little. This was like this decades ago that I worked there. And he was a psychiatrist, and we worked pretty closely at San Francisco General Hospital. And I asked him if he knew, and he said I had no idea. I was taking my lithium. I was granted a clinical faculty appointment because my work was so respected. Clinical faculty at the University of San Francisco Medical School in San Francisco. And I didn't know.
Fascinating. And you obviously made the decision to write the book. And
Hmm.
that kind of that could cut both ways in a lot of different situations, but you made that decision. You had the support, and I referenced it earlier. You had the support of family and friends, which is important. Why did you decide to write the book itself?
That's a very perceptive analysis of the situation with the pros and cons of writing the book, Ira.
Wow.
And I tried to write this book something like 18 years ago. And I started writing about Rockaway, New York, where I spent a lot of my childhood and youth. And I'd write about how I loved the beach, and I would write about my parents' divorce and how bad that was for me when I was 13. But I couldn't get to the hospitalizations. I just could not do it. It was still like PTSD in a form, I suppose. And so I wrote 2 other books in the meantime as a practicing therapist. And
Yeah,
I
you're
wrote,
productive. Sure.
yeah, these are books that suddenly I realized I'd have to write a book that teaches couples how to have a weekly marriage meeting, because I had become a couple therapy expert at my agencies. So I wrote Marriage Meetings for Lasting Love, 30 minutes a week to the relationship you've always wanted. And then I wrote another book for people who wanted to get married called Marriage Minded, an A to Z dating guide for lasting love. And then finally, I don't know exactly what clicked, but I was ready to write The Bipolar Therapist.
Well, was it a
And
segue from
it wasn't easy.
was it a segue from PTSD to avoidance and then finally deciding to write it? Were you going on that spectrum?
I don't know. I said I hadn't thought of it in those terms.
Yeah, because
Uh,
avoidance is one of those coping
yeah,
mechanisms.
okay,
So,
okay. PTSD probably was always in the background. It was
right.
that was a big secret. I mean, I didn't tell anybody, like I said, I worked at this hospital for about 4 years and none of my colleagues knew. I dated. I thought, why? I was single. I had an active social life. I had boyfriends. But my attitude was, why tell anybody if they could gossip about me, they could judge me.
Right.
I don't need that. I had plenty of that a long time ago. But when I was about to get married, when I knew that my husband was ready to propose, I told him, and that was very good to get that out, because you don't want somebody to find out later after you're married about some kind of secret like that.
Absolutely. Were you confident enough that you felt that when you told him that he obviously has a choice of whether to continue the relationship and to get married or to
Right.
leave based on, I mean, I'm assuming he didn't feel necessarily that you were hiding something, but he understood why you hadn't told him up to that point.
Yeah, I think he did understand.
Because before you're in a relationship, it's not something you necessarily want to discuss, but if it's going to be a serious one,
Right.
marriage, then you owed him that. And I think based on what you're telling me, he understood why at that point you told him.
Oh, I think he understood. Yeah. And then my attitude wasn't like, oh, I don't think it was, I'm afraid I'm going to lose him when I tell him. I think it was more like, it took me a long time. The bipolar therapist also explores my conflict about marrying and how my parents' divorce affected me, and how my maternal grandmother's abandonment by her husband as a poor non-English speaking immigrant in New York City. How my mother was raised in an orphanage. I had a lot of reasons to be afraid of marriage, because but I had gotten to the point with therapy and with mentors. Mentors are really, really important. People who could guide me to believe more in myself and that I was capable of creating a good marriage. I was ready to marry, and I knew if it wasn't him, it would be somebody else. That was it.
Was it after that that you became comfortable enough to finish the book, that part of the book that you were writing, that you could get into? Not yet, still not, huh?
No, that I was nowhere near writing a book then. I was nowhere near. No,
Yeah.
let's see, I've been married 36 years now, and I started seriously writing a book, that turned into the Bipolar Therapist.
Right.
Originally it was called Rockaway. See, I wasn't even going to put that in
Well,
the
that's
title.
what I meant. You were writing about your early life, and you said you paused when you got to that part about the bipolar experiences.
Right. I didn't get near there. And in fact, somebody in my writing group said something like, "This is really boring, kind of book." And, yeah, and he was right. Anyway, I was married quite a long time before I started this book. I wrote the other books.
You mentioned some of your colleagues who read the book and promoted the book, did blurbs for it. What was the reaction of your family to the revelations, if that's the term in the book, or the book itself, that you were willing to come forward and be public about it? What was the reaction in general?
Well, my cousin bought the book, so I'm very grateful to her, and she called me to discuss it. I have not heard from anybody else about the book. I did not make an announcement that I published it. And I don't really know. I didn't want to make a big deal about this book. They know I published it because they get my newsletters. And I don't know what they think.
Well, I think you're probably comfortable with them in the sense that, as you said, that they already know your history, they know the situation, they get
Right.
the newsletter. So yeah, that makes sense. What was the main reason that you decided to write the book? Was it to help yourself a little bit more, or to help others, or a combination of the two, or other reasons? What were those?
Yeah, I think it is a combination. Definitely because I experienced the stigma and the harassment, I believe I have an understanding that most people don't have of what it's like to have a mental illness. And I think a lot of people with a mental illness feel isolated. So I definitely wrote the book largely so that people don't feel alone in their experience being mentally ill, and to help promote more understanding and acceptance and respect for people who do have a mental illness, to know that we're much bigger than a diagnosis. We're multifaceted and we have strengths to contribute to the world, and we have ups and downs like other people have. And yes, some of them have more ups and downs, or greater ones. But all in all, we're all human, and there's a whole spectrum of experiences that we have. And when you ask about my family, I don't know whether they're defining me by my mental illness or not. I don't know if they want to read the book or if they think it's something that you're supposed to keep secret. But I'm very, very happy that, another cousin told me she was going to get the book. I haven't talked to her. So some of them are fine.
Marcia, here's what I want you to do after our conversation. I want you to get on the phone and call the rest of the family and tell them the book's out. What do you think of it? Or I'll send you a copy to read, and that way you'll know. You can't just leave it up to the fates as to whether they whether they like the book or not. Because don't forget, they'll read it and they'll recommend it to others, so you'll sell more copies.
That's funny.
Yeah, they'll
Yeah.
be your sales force in a way, your family sales force. I like that concept. When
Um,
when people read it, I'm thinking that it helps in another way, which is, here you have someone who is a professional, not just a professional, but a professional therapist, and they have human problems. And so someone who doesn't even have that level of expertise or knowledge or education, they're feeling some things that you are feeling, and they can at least know that, okay, I can address this in some way. They may not do it the same way you did it. They may not approach it the same way, but at least it gives them an insight into the fact that they're not alone. I think that's the key part.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really important for people to know that they're not alone. And especially if like me, it's a big secret for a long time, then you don't know what other people are going through.
Right. Because mental illness is so universal, have you thought about having the book translated into other languages and available in other countries?
Oh, yeah. I would love it if that would happen.
Well, so yeah, it's a thought. I mean, because again, these experiences that you're talking about, while they're not happy, they are universal in the sense that people experience not necessarily your specific illness, but illness in general in the mental sphere. And so the fact that that there's again an outlet for learning about how to cope and how to deal with it, I think it would be helpful, but it's something to think about anyway. Well,
No, I have thought about it. Yeah, I would like that to happen for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, my first book was translated into Spanish and Chinese.
Okay, well, there you go. And that's a big market right there.
Yeah, yeah.
How do
And
you
there's also an international market of English speaking and English reading
absolutely
people. So they do know about it that way because
right?
it's publicized for, yeah.
How
So
do you
it's very interesting. Like a fairly something like 4% or 8% of my newsletter readers are Swedish from Sweden. You know, it's like how they hear about it, but people find out.
it's a new world.
Yeah.
You've got, well, they have that, what's that thing they have in Sweden that's very popular? I can't think of the exact name, but it has to do with preparing when you're, no, it's.
I know it. I know it.
Yeah.
Death cleaning.
Yes.
Death cleaning.
Death cleaning.
I think that is
right.
a wonderful idea.
Yeah. And so
I
maybe
have in mind to do that. I think it's a fabulous idea.
well, hopefully it's not for many decades yet. So
hopefully, but
there
you
we
never.
go.
Right.
You were talking about, dealing with the people who are mentally ill. How do you deal with the family? I know that in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's another organization, Al-Anon, where the family members go to talk. What do you do with the family of a mentally ill person?
Well, there is an organization called NAMI, which I think stands for National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And that, by and large, serves people who do have a mental illness, but I think mostly it's serving, if I'm understanding it correctly, mostly it's serving family members of people who have a mental illness. And that's very supportive for a lot of people.
Well, that's good to know. So if people listening or watching us will know that there's
NAMI.
Okay. And do you think that when you look at your career, pre and post your hospitalizations, were you able to bifurcate it in the sense that despite the mental illness, you were able to help people the same way you did prior to hospitalizations?
It's probably more than despite, might say because of.
So you think you're more effective
think
now?
It gives me a level of, how can I put it, like compassion, understanding, acceptance, whatever people are going to know that I have had a big challenge and got past it, which is pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, you mentioned earlier that you were very effective with patients in terms of getting them through the process because you took the shortcuts because you knew how to do it. Do you find that you ever feel the need, and only if it would be effective, to help someone to share your experience with a patient or a client?
That was actually part of my reservation about writing the book. Are people not going to want to see me? I have a private therapy practice. Are people going to find out and then avoid me? And I don't get that that's happened. In fact, a couple I've been seeing lately, when I was telling them about I encourage a lot of people I see for couple therapy to read my marriage meetings book because marriage meetings are so effective for so many couples. And he said, "Oh, you wrote a book." And I said, "Well, I've written 3 books." And then he asked what they were. And when I got to the new, the Bipolar Therapist, I was like, oh, but then I said it and it didn't seem like he batted an eyelash. I said, "Yeah, I used to be bipolar." It's like, okay, so he's a recovering alcoholic.
Well, I could
like
see
everybody has something, I think is what it comes down to.
And I can see people coming to you because now they're starstruck. Here, I'm going to visit not only a therapist, but an author. See,
right. Yeah. Well, another client started seeing me with her husband after reading an article in the paper about the bipolar therapist and how I wrote it and all that. So if anything, it's probably, I don't know, I could say it's helped. It hasn't hurt as far as I know.
Okay, I have one good idea for you. I only want 10% out of the business, which is sell the books. Every time you get a new client or a patient there, just sell them a copy of the book or have books on display with an order form. And Yeah, it could work really well. Now, before I let you go,
I
tell
think we
me,
call that a conflict of interest.
that could be. Well, no,
Yeah.
not if you recommend it or
Oh,
recommend
no,
it for them.
no, I will recommend my books if I think somebody can use them
Yeah,
for
there you
sure.
go.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, what's the main thing you want people to take away from your book?
To know that we are all much bigger than a diagnosis, and to recognize if somebody's doesn't realize it, that's their problem, not ours.
Well, that's short and profound.
Thank you.
Yeah. Would you say that you're ready to write another book, like a part 2 of this book yet? Or are you going to wait and see how this one does first and decide whether you want to explore that subject further?
So far, I don't have another book in mind, and this might be it for now.
Okay. And
I'll probably keep writing because I love to write, but I have other ideas for writing that may not end up being a book. It's a lot of work, right? Writing a book is just the beginning. As you're aware, I think of the
yes,
getting the word out is it's quite energy and time consuming.
yeah, it
And
sure is.
at my age and stage, I don't know that I want to do that again. I do want to get the word out, continue to get the word out about the bipolar therapist, because I do believe it's a very important book and can help a lot of people.
And do you find writing is therapeutic for you?
Definitely. Yeah, you had asked me about why I wrote the book, and if it was more, I think you were implying, either that was it more for me or more to help
Right. That
people.
was my
And
one
I would
little
say
question.
that yes, it was both. Um, Writing, it's just a wonderful way to recognize and integrate our thoughts and our feelings and our experiences. And definitely writing the book, there might be times I would be laughing or smiling and crying, but it was all good in the big picture.
Well, that's a great way to leave it. My guest has been Marcia Naomi Berger. She's author of The Bipolar Therapist, A Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning. And it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all the usual places. And for everything about Marcia Naomi Berger, go to marcianaomiberger.com. You could follow her on LinkedIn. And also, Marcia, what's your Facebook?
Oh, Marriage Maven.
Marriage Maven on Facebook. Marcia, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been great.
And join us every Thursday for a new schmear on Ira's Everything Bagel.